This video is about using the pen tool in Photoshop to isolate objects within your image. The pen tool is primarily useful with man-made objects that are made out of straight lines and smooth curves. It was originally designed, I believe, to define the shape of car bodies. It is not useful with complex images from nature like trees or hair. So in this case, I have an example with really nice smooth curves and abrupt little changes in shape. So in my tool panel, I'm going to choose the pen tool, which is right down here. Before I use it, there's one setting I'd like to change, which I find makes it much easier to use the pen tool. And that is, I'm going to switch down to this little arrow tool down here. Then at the top of my screen in the options bar is an icon on the far right. It shows a little lock symbol surrounded by some dots. I need to turn that on. Now, depending on the version of Photoshop you have, that might also be a checkbox called something like Constrain Path Dragging. I find that having that setting turned on is essential to working with the pen tool the way I describe it. So now let's return to the pen tool and let's see how I could isolate this object. I'm going to start where I see an abrupt change in direction in its shape. So right here where I see this kind of little corner. What I'm going to do is click right where that corner is, and then if I needed a straight line, I just let go. Let me just show you what happens. If you click and let go, you get straight lines. I'll press delete to get rid of that. If, on the other hand, you want curved lines, instead of clicking and letting go, before releasing the mouse button, you need to drag to get these little handles to appear. And if each time you click and drag, you're going to create smooth curves. And each time you click and drag, these little handles come out. And those handles determine what direction the path that you're creating is going to travel in the moment it leaves the point that you have. So in this case, when it leaves this particular point, it's going to travel in this general direction before it goes anywhere else. And you can see that right when it leaves this point, it starts heading that direction. Then when it makes it into the next point, it's going to be coming in at the angle of the handle that's attached to that point. So instead of coming in sideways into this point or anything else, it's going to come straight down because of that direction. Then sometimes you're going to need the handle coming out of one side to be different than the handle coming out the other. Because the handle coming out the other side is going to determine what direction does the path go in when it leaves this point. In this case, it's going to head straight down. But what if that's on a sharp corner within your image and instead it needs to head to the left? Well, that's when you usually switch to a tool here that looks like a V shape. And that will allow you to grab these little ends and change them. So I can say when it leaves, instead of going straight down, it should kind of make a 90-degree curve and head this direction. So let's look at how we can use that, I'll hit delete a few times, to try to isolate this object. The pen tool is not the easiest tool to learn, but I'm going to show you how I find it to be the easiest way to accomplish this. I'm going to click where I see an obvious transition, like right here. And before I let go, I'm going to drag to pull out this handle, and I'm going to act as if I'm kind of an ant standing right on that point I just added. And I'm just going to think, if I were to walk around this shape, what direction would I take my very first step if I were to go around this shape? Well, if I'm going in the upward direction, I would walk at an angle about like that. And then I'll leave this. And I don't care about the length. I'll keep the length really short. Then I'll look at this and I'll say, where does this curve seem to change? And maybe I think it changes right about there. Just think of it as if you're driving a car and that's the shape of the road you're driving on. Where precisely might you need to change the direction of the steering wheel to continue driving on that edge? Well, right about here I might need to steer a little bit steeper towards the left. So I click, and if I need a smooth curve instead of a straight line, I need to drag. And in this case, I have two handles coming out. I'm looking at the handle pointing down. And I'm making sure that it points in whatever direction I would need to walk in if I was leaving that point, walking down. I wouldn't need to walk in like that into the shape or out like that. I would need to walk right on that edge like that. And I'll let go. Then I'll just confirm that when I leave that point, would I want to start walking in that direction, my very first step? Yeah, close to it. And then I'll come up here and say, well, right about there, I might need to change my steering wheel angle again. So I click, I drag, And I say, what angle will I be traveling at the moment I hit that point and when I leave? Come down here, I'll put another one here. And it varies on where you can put these points. A lot of people put in way too many. In fact, here I'm putting in more than I actually need. I can get away with a lot fewer than this. But when you're first learning, just wherever you think there's some variation in the curve, add a point. Now here I have the angle approximately correct coming into this point, but when I leave, I should not be heading in that direction. And that's when I need to go to that V-shaped tool that I mentioned earlier, but I don't actually physically change to it on my tool panel. Instead, I simply hold down the Option key on my keyboard. That's Alt in Windows, and it'll temporarily give me the V tool, so I can change this angle, because when I leave that point, I need to head in that direction. Okay, then I come around here, maybe right about here, I need to change my angle a little bit. Just get those so it's the angle I'd be walking in when I hit the dot and when I left. And then maybe another one here. Get the angle when I come in correct. When I leave, I shouldn't go right into the arm of it here, so I hold down the Option key, grab that, and point it the right direction. Add another one here. I don't want to leave going in that direction, so I'll hold on Option and drag that over and continue doing this. Now, if you click because you needed a straight line like I might need here, but then here I need a curve, you can always hold down, if there's no dots coming out, again, hold on the Option key, click on a dot you already have, and you can pull a handle right out of it. Okay, then I'm going to click right where I started, and we have our complete shape. Now, it doesn't look right, it doesn't look like it matches, but that's okay, because now here comes the easy part. I'm going to switch down here. There's two different arrow tools. I'm going to go to the Direct Selection tool. And what I'm going to do is click on the line itself, not the points that I've already defined, but the line itself. By pulling, if you find all the dots are active, it's going to move the whole path. So choose Undo, Command Z. If that happens, click away from the path and then click right back on it. So these little handles are hollow instead of solid. Then you can grab the line itself. Now, if you do that, the angle of those little handles should remain consistent, and the only thing that's changing is their length, and that's the hardest part to figure out. But if you just grab the line itself and drag like this, then you should be able to figure it out. If you just drag it around a little bit, kind of pull it out to where the edge of that object is, and then follow the edge of the object until it matches all the way across. So I'll just kind of grab it in the middle, pull it out to where the edge should be, and then kind of trace closer to the one point, closer to the other, until I can get it to be close to matching. So I pull it out and follow a little further this way, follow a little further this way. And if you can't get it to match, it usually means the angle of one of these ends is wrong. You might need to grab it a little bit and just fine tune it just a little before you can get it to be just right, because you might not have placed it at precisely the right angle the first try, and you can always adjust it. Getting pretty close there, but I'm just grabbing the middle of each one and pulling it on out, because the main thing that's important is that the angle of each handle is correct, and if they're not, come on out and adjust them. There we go. And this final one, I don't think I'll be able to get correct because that one handle is at the wrong angle. And so that's when I might go here to that little V-shape tool, because this should not be going straight into the shape here. That's not the angle I'd be walking at when I enter that point. I didn't mean to get that pop-up. Why am I getting the pop-up? Let's see if I can grab that. There we go. Move it down. I'm not sure why I was getting that pop-up earlier. Shouldn't have. Then I'll switch back to that arrow tool to grab the line itself. Now, once you get a path that's close to matching the subject that you have, then there's a bunch of things you can do to it. You can turn it into a selection if you want. You can just save it the way it is. You can make it isolate that particular part of the image. There is a panel called the Paths panel, and there you'll find something called your work path. That means a temporary path. If you double click on it, you can name it. I can call it the shape. And that means it would stay there. So that if I save the image and open it again, it'll still be there later. If you no longer want to see it, you can click on the empty space below and it would disappear. If you want to see it again, click on its name again. And it'll be hard to see, but you can have the shape sitting there. And while it's visible, I can go to the layer menu, and there's a choice here called Vector Mask. And I can say use the current path to limit where this particular layer shows up. And if I choose that, now we're not seeing the entire layer. We're only seeing the area defined by that particular path. And I can still come in here and click on it, and I'll still see that it's made out of a path, and I could fine tune that in case it doesn't precisely match by either grabbing these little handles or clicking on the line itself to fine tune it. And that's how the pen tool works. The pen tool is not useful on organic things from nature. It's useful with man-made things made out of smooth shapes, straight lines. And most of the tools that are in here I've been accessing using just the pen tool itself. When I held down the Option key, I was automatically getting to the one that looks like the letter V. And it's mainly the pen tool itself and then what's known as the direct selection tool that I use to end up creating paths. If you need your path to be turned into a selection, you can go to the Select menu and either drag the path down to what looks like a selection at the bottom of the Paths panel, or you can Command click, that's Control on Windows, on the little thumbnail here for the path. And if you do that, you're going to find that you have therefore turned it into a selection where the edges will look like marching ants. Takes quite a bit of practice using the pen tool. It's a great tool to know about, though. A lot of photographers I find never learn it, and because of that, there's a lot of objects that are very hard for them to select. But with a little bit of practice, I find it to be quite worth learning how to use the pen tool.